Okay, we are live for your favorite Friday evening habit. Happy New Year's, everyone. 2021, we just said goodbye to 2020. If 2020 were a car, it'd be the Cadillac Cimarron. And we are joined by our happy panel of our I just needed to mute the YouTube stream. Anyways, so we're live. We're joined by familiar faces. We are joined by the Dean of Media Biases and can sniff out media biases 100 miles away, Donald Irvine, Chairman of Action Academia. Welcome.
Thanks, Dwight.
Then we are joined by Brian Griffiths, Maryland blogger extraordinaire, mega Orioles fan. He believes in Orioles magic.
Make it happen, man. Feel it happen.
And then let's see what else. Yeah, and Brian has, how many heads do you have on your mantle of politicians you've taken down a few pegs?
There is a lot of people on the wall of shame. Hope looks like one may be getting added to the mantle here. 2021 starting off very nicely.
And then we're joined by Christopher Stock from the great state of North Carolina. And I've got some new North Carolina trivia for you that I can work in there. Yeah, the Tar Heel State, home of Duke University and home of our Governor Bob Ehrlich's law school, Wake Forest. Welcome, Chris.
Glad to be here.
And then we got Garrett Zaner from Towson University, where you've got a haunted hall on campus. Have you been by there? Have you heard any of those stories about hauntings in two of the dorm residence halls at Towson?
Are you talking about Scarborough and Freeman?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've never been in them, so I have no idea. But I have heard that they're terrible. They're just terrible dorms.
Have you seen anything when you walk by there with little faces in the windows that aren't really there? People dressed up in like 1920s get up, you know. People holding up Towson College signs, Towson State University signs.
I wish, because that would make Towson a lot more interesting than it actually is. So.
That means they're not that old. If they were holding up Towson State Teachers College signs, then you know they were from way back in the day.
And then we have Ryan Nidak hails from Darnestown. Is it called Darnestown, or is it called Gatesburg, or is it called North Potomac these days?
I don't know.
He's in one of those.
He's get mail sent to my house, so
he's in the limbo part of Montgomery County where it has an identity crisis. I remember when it was called Darnestown. Like when my friend Jack Jordan lived there, who still lives there now.
What I want to do is similar to Port Tobacco, Maryland, which is our smallest municipality with probably about a dozen people. I think we should incorporate my little slice of Montgomery County.
And you could be the mayor.
Yeah, exactly. I could be the mayor.
Port Tobacco, for the record, has 13 residents. 13.
Yes. How many of them typically vote?
Well, 5 of them are on the city council, so I'm going to guess 5.
Okay, there you go.
You know, we could all just move to Port Tobacco and take it over if they're not Republicans there.
But why? And you're living in Port Tobacco.
And then we bring in big development. We bring in a Walmart. We bring in a Target.
We bring in a Sheetz and a Cookout. I'm there.
Oh,
you like
Cookout?
I love Sheetz.
Good.
We actually got Sheetz T-shirts for Christmas.
Really?
One, like the home state T-shirt. I have a Sheetz T-shirt now that has the Maryland outline on it.
See, I like Wawa's.
I like Sheetz. First time I went to Sheetz was this year. Me and my sister, we went to West Virginia to get away from the pandemic and go to Berkeley Springs, West Virginia to, enjoy their spas there, and went to Sheetz for the first time. It was magical. Their mozzarella sticks are just amazing.
Yeah, I tell you, Garrett loves.
Well, what kind of pizza do they serve? Now, if they serve great pizza, Dwight will be there. It doesn't matter what the gas station is, right?
No pizza. No pizza.
So that's the real problem, is some other gas stations have pizza.
No, Wawa's doesn't have pizza, but Wawa has the best coffee. It's better than Starbucks.
Okay, well, if you don't drink coffee, that's not an issue. The only thing, here's what Wawa has over Sheetz. This is the one place I will credit Wawa, is that they have the Coke Freestyle machine and Sheetz does not. That is the one redeeming quality of Wawa.
Now over at you could push a button on an app on your phone to get your sodas. Totally touch.
All right, I'm lazy. I'm not that lazy.
Dwight, aren't we getting a Wawa's in Montgomery County, or Ryan?
Yes,
I hope.
It's going to be on 355, right by the old IBM building. And
Oh, really? Oh, that's nice.
anyways, we
Yeah, so now
Should we actually talk about what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, there's a
Or
Godzilla
we just
marathon on right now
into
too.
this whole thing?
Who cares about politics? We want to talk
Yeah,
about
who
when's
cares
the best
about
gas
politics?
station.
But speaking of politics, let's go ahead and start off with the what we're facing next week, which is the election certification. Which theoretically the final step in this long process, for which I'm sure Brian has said it has been over for a while. Dwight seems to be at least on that bandwagon, more or less. I've heard him say, more or less it's over. But we have a lot of people out there, a lot of our friends who are just, they're just digging their heels in there. But I really thought, to be honest, I knew Republicans in Congress were going to get a bunch of them because you had Mo Brooks start off, and you knew they were going to get joined by a bunch of others. It was the Hawley thing by coming up saying that he was going to object that I was a little surprised at. That I thought McConnell had a fairly firm grip on his senators to keep them from doing that. Plus, we also have that lawsuit with Louis Gohmert trying to give Mike Pence extra powers to overturn the election. So where are we going with this, guys? Chime in.
I'll jump
Going
in.
to hell in a handbasket. That's where we're going. This entire thing is absolutely bonkers. You have 140 goofballs in Congress, plus Senator Hawley, whatever his name is, who apparently just decided that overturning the will of the voters is more important than doing the right thing, and placating a knucklehead lefty Republican in name only who is being shown the door in 3 weeks, that making him happy is more important than doing the right thing. Honestly, I'll tell you this, and this, you probably disagree with me on this, every one of them who votes for this should have their ass thrown out of Congress. This is ridiculous. It's seditious. It's insane. The election has been over for quite a while now. The 1 in 60 or whatever court records that the Trump campaign has, the Jets are looking at their court record and saying, that's a bad streak, dude. And, it's like the fact that so little of the Trump cases have involved anything regarding evidence says everything that we need to know about this. This is just masterpiece theater for the QAnon crowd. And some people are eating it up.
Yeah, that's my thoughts exactly.
Yeah, so I would only object to that Jets comment. We are
yes, they won a game.
Few games.
The Jets won a game,
and us Ravens fans, thank you for that. But
yeah,
but it's like
otherwise they've been home for they've been sitting out of the playoffs here. Beloved Ravens.
Hey, we win. If we win, we're in. That's all that's important.
So to provide a little bit of a softer.
Go ahead, Ryan. Chime in here, but I want to ask something as well.
Yeah, sure. Oh, I was going to say, to provide a little bit of a softer take than Brian, I agree with the general principle. The election is over, right? Like President Trump unfortunately lost the election. I voted for Donald Trump. Most of the people on this panel voted for Donald Trump.
We all did, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Not all.
Not all of us.
I said most, right? But he lost.
I forgot.
And whether he lost fair and square, at a certain point, you have to put up or shut up, right? So if they had evidence that there was voter fraud, there's no silver bullet coming on January 6th.
Yeah.
I hate to break it to you.
And
If they had
also,
evidence of voter fraud, it would have come out by now.
And let me put this all in context. 1960, President Nixon beat that fraudulent Jack Kennedy in 1960, but President Nixon did not go to the courts. President Nixon did not, and then 8 years later, he came back and.
I want to pivot though, and we'll get to Don's question also. But I think honestly, what's just as bad, if not worse, than the grandstanding in Congress, which some of it's just to appease certain people, is the people saying, "Oh, I'll never vote for another Republican." The hardcore Republicans, "I'll never vote for another Republican again," or "We need to primary everyone who's not quote unquote stopping the steal, because if we don't do this now, we'll never have another legitimate election again." And that's that's the very definition of cutting off your nose to spite your face, right? Oh, we didn't reelect a Republican this time, so therefore all elections are illegitimate ever, and we're never going to vote again, or we'll vote for Democrats out of spite. It's like, okay, so let's take this apart for a second. You're going to vote for Democrats or not turn out and vote for Republicans, so help Democrats on a net basis. To spite them
like
for winning an election because you want less Democrats, that doesn't.
And Ryan, to your point, that's what's playing into a lot of what's going on in Georgia right now. And I know we're not to Georgia yet, but we're talking about some people who are already talking about not wanting to go vote in the Georgia runoff, where you only have two choices. You get D and you get R. You get Republicans who may be kind of too Trumpy for a lot of people's taste versus Democrats who are insane. And your choice at this point is, do you want divided government or do you want Joe Biden and company to get control of the entire kit and caboodle? And you know, I think you're talking about a much larger point, of course, because that's not going to happen until after the Georgia runoff. But you know, it's you know, and it goes the other way too, because there are people, some of whom are saying that I'm not going to vote for a Republican if 140 of them do move this thing. So I mean, there's no good answer right now, other than the fact that I think a large section of the Republican Party needs an enema. But you know, it's you know, there's no. This is not a zero-sum game. There is no black and white answer to this, and I think to your point that too many people are ready to just give up the ghost, no matter which side of the aisle they're on.
Can I point to the silver lining of 2020?
It's over.
We ran the tables in South Florida. South Florida is redder today than it's ever been before. We basically, if we actually put a little bit of effort, we probably could have taken the House back this time. We held the Senate for the most part.
I think we'll take the House back in 2022, but
yeah, we'll take it back, but we could have taken it back, I think, in 2020. If we had put some efforts onto some of these races, we probably could. I mean, the fact that we held Congressman King's old House seat, we held the guy from Texas, what's his name? You know what I'm talking about, Will Hurd. We held his seat. I mean, this speaks volumes.
So Dwight, to build off of your point, I think you're absolutely right. And it's an interesting scenario, right? Where President Trump lost, but I would argue he left the Republican Party, at least electorally, in a very good position, right? Yeah. We've made more inroads with minorities than we have in any past election. We've made inroads in areas like South Florida, near the border in Texas, very important areas. And we picked up seats in the House of Representatives in a year where we lost the presidency and are in prime position to take it back in 2022.
The question is going to be, what was the cost? Not necessarily.
I'm getting to that, Brian.
And I'm not even talking about electorally. I'm talking about philosophically. I mean, considering that the Republican Party has taken a very drastic shift to the left over the course of the last 4 years.
I'm a little disappointed in all the Republicans want to give $2,000 away to everyone. It's like,
I'm disappointed in that as well, and we'll get to that later. But my point was more that, Trump left the Republican Party in a very good position and has the opportunity to have a very good legacy in the party electorally. But in a way, with all of the damage that could be done from this election grandstanding, to Brian's point about there are people who aren't going to vote for Republicans because of the grandstanding over Stop the Steal. You're taking that strong position, you're whittling away at it, and you're ruining your own legacy. I think it's very short-sighted.
Mm-hmm. I think it's an interesting point there, but the thing too, to me, to a degree though, is that, the Republicans wound up, doing better, on those other elections than Trump, but kind of in spite of Trump, right? I mean, Trump did a lot of damage to himself. I mean, and he continues, in my opinion, to continue to do more damage to himself with all these accusations. Brian was pointing out about the 60 or so lawsuits. One of the things that always struck me was that, yes, in this country, you can pretty much sue at the drop of a hat, but all these lawsuits
just we know that one
really damaging because there was no evidence, and there was a bunch of poor lawyers. I mean, it was just a terrible effort. I think that also leaves a little bit of a stain on the party too, that they had these massive efforts to do this stuff, and they come up empty because there was nothing there to begin with. I mean, it was just when you that just smacks of so much desperation out there. It's kind of ridiculous. So there are pluses and minuses along the way here. I think 2022, 2024 look better, but one of the problems I think we're going to face too is that until we know what Trump is going to do in 2024, those potential 2024 candidates are kind of frozen. They're kind of waiting to see, because Trump kind of sucks all the air out of a room when he's out there. If he would throw support to somebody, or his populist base would go to a candidate like Cruz or whoever, then that's a whole nother story. But boy, I tell you, this is crazy times.
I think it'll be interesting to see a month or two after Trump's out of office how much level of base support he really has, and I don't think we know the answer to that yet.
But here's the thing. Okay, as I'm probably well, with the exception of Don, I think I'm older than everyone else here. But a lot of this is like a lot of this is political theater. I've seen this happen in the past. And one thing people need to understand is, look, we're not as bad as we were in 92 when Bill Clinton became president. Nobody ever even thought, actually, I did predict in 92 that we would take the House and Senate in 94. People say, oh, that's just you just saying that. It's not going to happen. What happened? But here's the thing. My point is, we're not as bad as it was 2008 when John McCain, who was very happy to be part of history, to lose to Barack Obama. When we lost that, they had a supermajority in the Senate. They had close to a supermajority in the House. And it's not like that. It's not that bad. We're going to be able to stop them on a lot of things. There's a lot of moderate Democrats that are not going to be going along with Pelosi and the squad for crying out loud. And
I think the one thing you had in between 92 and 94 that you don't have now is the visionary leader for the Republican Party.
There are
Newt
Gingrich.
Yeah, but let me tell you, there are other visionary leaders out there. There is, as Chris knows, he didn't do well running for governor, but Lieutenant Governor Forrest of North Carolina, great guy, visionary. He'd be excellent in Congress. He'd be great in the Senate. I think he should think about looking to run for U.S. Senate. I think he could win that. We've got a lot of new rock stars that are coming onto the scene. We've got that are visionaries that can.
I think we've got a lot of people that are new and coming onto the scene that could take that role. What's going to be interesting to me is who ultimately fills it, right? Because to Brian's point of what is Trump's sway over the base going to be 2 to 3 months after he leaves office, I would say at the very least, I don't know how much it will diminish, but it will diminish from what it is right now. There's going to be some element of people who don't care what he has to say anymore, and that's going to leave a vacuum for people to compete for. Nikki Haley will be competing for it.
Mm-hmm.
Our own governor, Larry Hogan, will probably be competing for it. Ben Sasse will be competing for it. You'll have Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley competing for it. And where is that really going to go? That's the big unknown.
Honestly, a lot of, look, right now, a lot of people are saying 2024, you've got Kristi Noem, the Kristi Noem faction. But honestly, what we've seen in history is nobody saw Bill Clinton coming out of the Democrat side, this governor from some one-horse state where their biggest claim to fame is they're not as bad as Mississippi, and they've got Alabama, they're tailgating Alabama. Or nobody really saw George W. Bush running into basically becoming the nominee and becoming president in 2000.
I would disagree with you on that. I think Bush W was the front runner kind of from the get-go.
No, let me tell you, there was a lot of people that were because I was working for ACU CPAC back then. There was a lot of people that were not Governor Bush fans. They were all for Steve. They were part of the, I believe it was Steve Forbes. They were a lot of the Steve Forbes people, and you had a lot of people that were for, what's his name? Basically the squishy people for John McCain. The hardcore movement people were for Steve Forbes. And I think George W. Bush, I was a George W. Bush guy from day one. And then you had the people that were the Dan Quayle people, because I remember I was talking to one of the Dan Quayle folks. I go, has anybody suggested to Dan that he runs for Senate of Indiana? Because that was when Evan Bayh had run. Evan Bayh was up for, I think it was Evan Bayh that was up for re-election. And he could have won that seat, because he was a senator from Indiana before, or governor. And the response I got is, I don't want to be one of the heads on the side of the road that suggested Dan Quayle do something other than be president. But with that said,
I want to ask though, going back just one more thing here, and then we'll move on. Back to kind of Brian and Ryan talking about these representatives and voting for, not voting for things on Stop the Steal and all these kind of things. Do you think that by in 2022 when they're up for re-election, these congressmen in particular, do you think the voters will remember that? Do you think the opposition is going to use that as something to remind them of? Will the Trump people still be around enough? Will there be enough people around to take on the Stop the Steal people type of thing, to say, no, we got to get you didn't support it, we're going to get rid of you? I mean,
I think there's two different avenues. There's two different aspects of that, actually. One, there's, as everybody on this call knows, there are always people in the Republican Party who think that the other side is not pure enough and will hold on to some whatever grievance that they have, real or imagined. So I think that that's going to cut both ways. You could have people who are mad that people didn't vote to stop the steal, or they're mad that they did vote to stop the steal. On the other side of that, you also are going to have moderate Democrats potentially running against some of these members of Congress who did vote for it and can try to use that as a cudgel against them in 2022, especially if the districts do get redrawn. And that's kind of the wild card in all of this too, is that a lot of these members of Congress may not be running the exact same district, 2 years from now. So it could really cut both ways.
I want to bring Chris in because Chris is Chris, and then we'll get to Garrett, because Chris is from outside of the Beltway. How is this all playing in Raleigh?
Oh man,
how is AB and Floyd the Barber? How are they feeling about this?
I'm sorry, how's who?
Yeah, you're from North Carolina.
What outdated reference am I supposed to respond
Andy
to?
Griffith, the Andy Griffith Show.
Okay.
Cody Leach knows what I'm talking about when I say this,
Just keep bringing up names. I have no idea what you're saying. There's not much difference in terms of the reaction here. I mean, I do kind of see it, and I think most people kind of see it as kind of the last ditch effort that you're going to see leading up to this date of potential things that are going to be done to sway things, whether that's procedural or it's more of an optics standpoint from what we see. I just, whether, Hawley's the only one that does it, I don't know. I really haven't seen anything more than, maybe who else in the Senate is leaning that way. But I don't foresee it as, it changing anything. I don't see anything coming of it. I don't really even think there's going to be that much retribution. I think we're seeing right now is like the dwindling of this, of this argument. We're seeing the dwindling of support for it. You're seeing Republicans in the Senate and the House kind of dig their feet in understanding, a little bit more of what I think just touched on, which is maybe the most important thing, that is redistricting, as you're going to kind of see them dig in here and try to rally their base, or, maybe just kind of understand that this Trump Republican platform is slowly but surely sliding away, and that there's going to have to be something else for them to put their feet on, per se, here to kind of continue moving forward. So I think a lot of people over the last couple of weeks, especially, have been distancing themselves. And I think that's been pretty evident throughout this Stop the Steal, however you want to look at it, whether it's in Congress or outside of it. You've seen a lot of people, and that goes for the same here with people in North Carolina too. I mean, you've seen legislators here that are, trying to do what they can to interject themselves in any potential lawsuit that's on the table, especially that Texas lawsuit a couple of weeks ago. And then you saw others that wanted nothing to do with it at all, and we're really kind of looking forward, rather than dragging themselves down, to fighting an uphill battle here of something that I think most people have understood for the last couple months is not a fight that is likely they're going to win. So I think people are kind of looking 200 yards in the future here rather than 100 yards back.
I just wanted to say, though, going back to Brian and Ryan's discussion about leadership potential and people filling the void in a post-Trump Republican Party, I don't really see it as more of a problem as a wealth of, people, who can fill that void. What I see as a problem for our party right now is the sheer amount of visions, for the party. Because right now we still have lots of Reagan conservatives in the party. We have a bunch of libertarians like Rand Paul. We have a bunch of, Trump train conservatives, Make America Great Again conservatives. And so the thing is right now, our party, when Trump gets out of office, we are going to have to do a lot of soul searching and have to try to figure out of this, all of these, voices who are crying out for their own vision to, take hold of the party. What are we going to do? And, and I think best way forward is going to be probably kind of an amalgamation of a lot of these, because the thing is in all honesty, one of the best things that Donald Trump did do for the Republican Party that was good was bring in the sheer amount of blue collar workers and, factory workers and things like that, union workers that we previously never got in the Republican Party because of our, previous anti-union stances. So the thing is how are we going to continue holding that coalition with previous, traditional Republican coalitions like businesses and middle class and rich, for example.
I only take umbrage with that slightly, only because the rank and file union members have always voted Republican for the most part. They're the ones who are hunters and own guns, and it's always the union membership who is never going to switch sides because they're so entrenched in the.
It's just the leadership of the unions.
Yeah, the leaderships are so much entrenched in the Democratic Party.
Like Jimmy
I think
Hoffa.
that's why I always take umbrage with this idea that, oh, well, we're a workers' party now. And it's like, okay, well, what does that mean?
Hey,
in my
I don't
opinion,
like being
we've
called the
always-
Workers' Party, frankly.
Well, but we've always, in my opinion,
No,
we've
no,
always
the
been a
work-
workers'
that
party
sounds very
because we've always been the
socialistic.
smaller guy. We've always been for taxpayers. We've always been-
Exactly. That's why we support
and
tax
when
cuts.
you start talking about workers' party and you start embracing a lot of the rhetoric and the ideology of the Democrats, that's where we start having a problem with becoming, well, are Republicans just becoming a separate offshoot of the Democrats, nitpicking on the edges?
Yeah, you
But
got
Brian,
something.
sorry, Dwight, I'll jump in here, Bo. But
Yeah.
Brian, I agree with you. We don't on messaging. We need to resist the temptation to become an offshoot of the Democrats and things like $2,000 for everyone, which will snowball into slippery slope into universal basic income are bad. But I would disagree that we've always been the party that union members have voted for overwhelmingly. I mean, where my grandfather's from in Northwest Indiana in Steel Country, people. I mean, back in the Bill Clinton days, they did vote for Democrats because they all owned guns and they had lots of property and they were proud to make things in America, but they voted for Democrats because it was
Blue Dog Democrats.
They were.
I mean,
blue dog Democrats.
And maybe this is just part of being from a competitive county. It's like when we're running with Governor Ehrlich in 02 and 06. It was we couldn't keep the union rank and file guys in materials and bumper stickers and signs and everything else like that. We couldn't make them happy enough. They were happy to help out.
I think it's gone like more recently, really in the last 20 years, as the Democrat Party has become more of a woke party. That's the party, or that's the part of the Democrat Party that scared started to scare union members away and started driving them to Governor Ehrlich rallies. To Garrett's point, I think President Trump did help bring them in. At what cost? I don't bring them in even more. At what cost? I don't know. But it hasn't always been that way. And they were Reagan Democrats that then switched back to the Democrat Party.
See, if I could get on my soapbox for a minute, Ryan.
Yep,
the Republican Party has always been the party of better ideas. If you want to have success and prosperity, you want to be a Republican. We're not the party of handouts or the party of hand-ups. We're the party of tax cuts, family values, and national security. That is the three tenets of the Republican Party. That is Ronald Reagan's Republican Party. That is Richard Nixon's Republican Party. We are not the party of handing out $2,000 to people. We're not the party for giving. I don't even like the idea of giving $600 to people. Or unemployment from the federal government. Unemployment is a state issue. People are, like if you watch any of the news stories, all the people's unemployment ran out. No, it didn't, because they're still getting their state unemployment. They're still getting their benefits from the state.
I think we should just shift into the stimulus payments topic now because it seems we're kind of going in that direction. At this point, I'm categorically against any sort of stimulus payments. Okay, especially it's starting to get ridiculous. In the House, they just introduced an amendment to include dependent college students such as myself in the $2,000 stimulus payment they're proposing. As much as if they offer me a $2,000 payment, I'm going to take it rather than donate.
I didn't know about that, Ryan.
But
No, I'm excited.
I should not.
Whoa!
Garrett and I should not be getting stimulus checks from the government, okay? And neither should any of you, right? I mean, they're timing this perfectly with the new OLED TV sales in February, but it.
Yeah, right. You know why they got to do those?
Got to get something for the Super Bowl, right? For those.
No. See,
that's why it
guys.
has to be $2,000 instead of $600.
And Ryan
doesn't get you OLED.
And Ryan, the reason they have to do that is because President Trump didn't win, because they could have all gotten OLED TVs for a 5-finger discount if President Trump had won, because they could have smashed windows and had riots and
Yeah.
Well,
I just
like
want
what-
to say one last thing, though. About what Dwight was just about saying, because the thing is I will say, tax cuts, national security, and values. Those were the key tenets of the Reagan and onward. But the thing is that was Reagan and onwards. Well, pretty much actually Goldwater and onwards. Okay, because
Eisenhower actually goes back.
I would say it really started with Goldwater, and he was the one who really transformed the Republican Party into kind of like that conservatarian mix that we have today. And so before that, we were a big fan of subsidies. We were a big fan of,
we were actually the anti-communist party before that.
Let's be real.
Going back
If you
into
look
the
at
Gilded
if you look
Age.
at the corporate handouts, we still are a party of subsidies.
Yes.
But
And
they
so the
create
thing is I'm just saying the party has room to evolve, devolve, move, go from vision to vision, depending on what we think is best for the country. And I think that's what's most important. So that I will say I'm kind of half and half on the $2,000 stimulus check. I kind of see that it can do good. I absolutely don't agree that it should go to dependents. Like, I don't think I should be getting money because
But if you
my
get
parents
it,
are
you
still
take the money if you get it.
if they give it to me, I'll
You know
take
what
it.
we
but-
did with our kids' last stimulus money? We put it in their savings accounts. And guess what? Because my 15-month-old is not going to go buy a TV. You know, it's like it's like.
What if they wanted to buy Daddy a TV for Christmas?
And isn't that part of the underlying problem, though, is that the stimulus payments are not targeted to the people who really need them and we're actually going to spend it. You know, what we see the majority of the stories from when they talk about people about getting that $600 or $2,000 or whatever the amount, you know, will finally wind up being, is just that they're going to be paying down some bills and some debt. They're not actually going out and actually spending new money and doing that. You know,
Right.
Yeah.
when I get my $600 and my wife's $600, well, I've got a $675 WSSC front foot benefit thing that is, you know, that I have to pay for a total of 30 years on my house. So that's what that'll help me pay for. But that's not going to stimulate the economy. You know, do I really need that money? No. I mean, it's just kind of nutty.
So Don,
Yeah,
to
and-
your point, my opinion on stimulus is personal stimulus is not the way to go here, right? And generally, I'm against government handouts in general, but these are extreme circumstances only because when the government goes to your business and says you're not allowed to operate at no fault of your own, that there's not a lot you're leaving people to do. So I think it should really be targeted to businesses. Now, the problem is PPP was totally botched in terms of how it was rolled out. But the way it should have been done is that same idea of, you know, keep payroll going, right? People, you shouldn't just be giving handouts to everyone. And the way to target it is not by trying to figure out individual versus individual who should get it. It's saying, okay, you were on a payroll somewhere, you had a job. We're shutting down your job because of lockdown measures, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that's what's happening. That's not your fault. We're going to ensure that your employer can keep paying you. That's one thing. Just giving people a $600 check out of nowhere, even if they kept their job. I mean, so they can go buy a new TV is completely ridiculous.
See, the way they should be doing these stimulus should be from top down, frankly. If you give, say, hypothetically, let's say we give a tax holiday for the payroll tax, and we don't make them pay it back, that puts more money in employers' pockets right away. They can use it to hire people, keep people on their payroll. Cutting taxes is the best stimulus, frankly. Worked when George W. Bush did a tax cut. I know there's a lot of neo-Republicans.
Right, that doesn't work in this situation where people's income goes to zero, right? It works if you have an income, but cutting the income tax when you lose your job isn't helping you.
Because I would argue that tax breaks are best when there's not a crisis going on. Like, for example, tax breaks are always the best when the economy is booming and everything's going good. But once, you know, there is, you know, a crisis such as the, you know, 2009 Great Recession, the pandemic going on right now, I don't think tax cuts would be the best thing because one, unemployment benefits, people do need those for the people who generally do need them. Not just some people who have been leeching on the system because of this, because a lot of people have been taking advantage of it. But I think that right now, tax cuts wouldn't be the best idea. From an economic standpoint, because I'm taking economics right now.
Yeah. I disagree on that because, I mean, tax cuts are always the best decision. When in doubt, cut taxes. That's what I've always said. And
Dwight, how does a 5% tax cut help you if your income dropped to zero?
It doesn't help you directly, but it will help you indirectly because when the engine starts, look, we're coming out of this. We've got
you have no money because you worked as a waiter at a restaurant, and Stuart Pittman came in and said that you're not allowed to have a restaurant anymore of wait staff, and then they got.
And
you don't have a job, you're not paying taxes. A tax cut's that's not going to do you any good.
Exactly.
The problem is, like, for example, last week I went to Buca di Beppo, Italian carryout, right? They used to have a whole wait staff. They had a bunch of people working there. Now they just have a hostess to check, like, to manage the to-go orders, and they have the cooks. Half of the restaurant staff are out of work. I don't know whether they're paying them or not because I don't know their books. But if you go in there, there's half as many staff as there usually are, okay? Those are people who, through no fault of their own, Mark Elrich came in and said, you're not allowed to have indoor dining. So therefore, I mean, you're not going to hire people just to sit around and stare into space.
Mhm.
So they don't have a job. I mean, that's why I think the stimulus needs, or not, I'm not going to use the word stimulus. That's why I think government aid in this situation, if you're going to shut down businesses, should be targeted towards helping businesses who were shut down keep their payroll
Mhm.
going, right? Those
I'm fine.
people-
I am
Absolutely.
fine. Ryan, I am fine with that. I am totally fine with that. You know,
okay, that's good. You just said we should cut taxes instead of doing that. So
I said when in doubt, cut taxes. Why can't we do both? We should do both, frankly.
That's my concern ultimately about all of this. The fact that we're still, no matter how much stimulus we're issuing, our taxes are going to go up eventually because we're going to have to pay off this debt theoretically at some point that we keep piling on to future generations.
Yeah, I mean,
And how long are we going to go on doing this? I mean, in
We are
terms
the party of
how
fiscal
much,
responsibility.
where does this aid finally end at this point? I mean, the Democrats seem to make a point. So, you know, we're going to continue, they're going to make a point or a case that we're going to continually need this. This is,
And philosophically, it's hard for Republicans to fight back when so many of them are saying that we need more and more direct stimulus.
my fear here, to Don and Brian's point, is that this is going to be, and I know people say slippery slope is a fallacy, but this is going to be a slippery slope into any time there's any sort of economic hardship. We advocate for direct payments to individuals until we just have universal basic income.
And that's where it's headed. That's where this is all.
That's where this is heading, right? Next time there's a recession that's caused by housing or some other sector, if it's not, you know, a global government shutdown of businesses or national government shutdown of businesses, really it's state by state, but most states are getting shut down. Next time there's some sort of, you know, just normal economic downturn, they're going to say, okay, we're going to make direct payments. And that's unacceptable. But how do we fight back against it when we have Josh Hawley, who I would not be very happy if he was the future of the Republican Party, by the way. But
And by the way, the UBI as a concept is something that I could theoretically get behind if we take a hatchet to a lot of the entitlement programs that we already have.
I agree with you, Brian.
That
I
money
think
would be more effectively spent directly going to it.
that gets
Friedman was the guy who created the idea.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
but that
Friedman
gets
knows what he's talking
about UBI. I don't think it should be universal. I would be 100% in favor of basically wiping away all our existing welfare programs and people who would otherwise qualify for welfare or food stamps and all those programs, just getting, you know, direct cash payment. That gets rid of so much administrative bloat.
Yeah.
It's much more efficient. And then you don't have people selling their food stamps for drugs
And this
and
is,
things like that.
and Ryan, this is all on top of the other crazy Democrat stuff they want to do is free college education, you know, free
Well,
junior
no,
college.
this wasn't on the agenda, but Elizabeth Warren wants us to pay, you know, wipe away $50,000 of student loan debt per person by executive order.
right. And I'm glad you brought that up because as you're discussing this, half this panel are young guys, right? You know, you guys, I mean, how do you feel about this whole idea about, you know, getting debt wiped away, you know, overall, you know, like $10,000 or more or whatever.
Banks would implode.
Is that fair?
No, banks would implode. The country would just there is, what is it? It's like $3 trillion in student debt that's out there. Like if it was wiped clean, think of the amount of banks just, you know, crediting agencies that would immediately just, you know, would have to default because then they don't have anything. Like I'm all for, I do think the student loan crisis is real and that it definitely has gotten out of hand since my parents' generation. I think part of that has to do with the privatization of Sallie Mae. I think that's the right one because there's so many different Mays.
Yep, Sallie Mae.
Yeah.
Sallie Mae. Once we privatized Sallie Mae,
Fannie Mae.
yeah. Once we started privatizing Sallie Mae, it started immediately cooperating with many different universities in order to jack up tuition costs, making loans even more steep, making it even harder for students to get out of student loan. So I'm all for ways of, you know, helping to ease student loan, but a wholesale wiping of it is definitely the worst idea because it would absolutely destroy, you know, our banking system, and so many people would be out of work in that economic crisis.
Here's something for you, like food for thought. Like when I was at George Washington, tuition was $22,000 a year. $22,000, you know. Brian, when you were at GW, what was it, about 30,000 or 35,000?
I was only there for grad school, but when I went to Western Maryland for undergrad, it was about 22 a year, and then grad school was.
Oh, where was Western Maryland College? Where was it?
Westminster.
It's now called McDaniel.
Don't use
Oh.
that name.
Yeah, McDaniel.
Don't call it
I
that.
don't like that name. Okay, we'll have a discussion about that. I'm curious, but anyway,
But
Plus
but
the new
issue-
president, right?
yeah.
to Garrett's point, I think that like it has gotten out of hand, and a lot of people were fed this notion that they have to go to college when they really didn't, and the prices got jacked up because there was guaranteed loans. But that's the big problem: is the guaranteed loans.
Yes.
There's no incentive to lower prices when you're guaranteed. You have a guaranteed leverage that you're going to give out to people, and I think that's before we talk about any sort of relief for people, which I'm not categorically against. I am against just wiping it away, but there are things we can do.
But see, Ryan.
Wait, let me finish. Before we talk about that, I think we have to cut off the guaranteed loans. Student loans should not be guaranteed. I'm sorry. If you're going to get a degree in finance or computer science or
engineering or
engineering,
STEM.
it doesn't even have to be STEM. It can be like a useful degree, finance, accounting. Go ahead, get a loan. If you're going to get a degree in basket weaving or dance or voice
Philosophy,
okay, to collect debt, that should not be guaranteed. And that's a big problem. Is a lot of the biggest problem with student loans is people getting degrees in things they don't actually get jobs in.
That's because we've made the college degree in and of itself the basic admission requirement for any meaningful work. What the high school diploma was.
So
that's
that's
when my parents graduated high school. But do you guys remember what Rick Perry did when he was governor of Texas? He tried to put in place a $10,000 degree. I think it was at least at one University of Texas school.
It was the University of Texas system, Brian.
Yeah, I think it was the entire University of Texas system. And that's the issue to the points you guys were making earlier about kind of when Sally Mae went went private, and then you have the schools start raising tuition. A lot of those schools that started raising tuition are state schools. We could solve a lot of this problem by reining in our public university system to try to stop pretending that our public universities are somehow private universities with this jacked up tuition, tons of six-figure salary. You ever look and see how many people make six figures at College Park? It's a lot.
I mean, Brian, University of Maryland College Park, when I was there, in-state was roughly about $5,000, room and board included.
But Dwight, now it's like living at an all-inclusive resort. You see, they've jacked up the administrative bloat and the student experience bloat and the cultural centers and all of this bullshit because they have an unlimited source of money that they can pull from.
Yeah, and that is...
And to Brian's other point, I will say, the thing about people are getting degrees in things that aren't relevant because it's a basic entry-level requirement for any job, a prerequisite. I think that's wrong. The problem is, though, how do you solve that other than people in industry saying, we're not going to do this anymore?
Well, this actually goes back to high school, quite frankly, because, so many of our high school programs, instead of just trying to provide a quality education with the idea that you're going to go to college. And that kind of passes the buck on a lot of, what is now taught at some 100 level college classes was actually taught in high school a long time ago. So instead of preparing people for the workforce, high school is preparing people for college. Whereas if you look and you have so many occupations that don't require a high school degree, particularly people who work with their hands or have particular skills. Plumbers, carpenters, electricians make a ton more than somebody who earns philosophy degree. And we need to recenter public education in our public schools to say it's okay to not go to college, and here are some of the ways that you can do that.
Yeah.
One of the top institutions I hate in this country is the College Board. It's one of the worst things that we ever created, and it just, like you said, it funnels people into college when they really shouldn't be.
Yeah, and I went to high school in the future municipality of Nyack City, where we're going to incorporate now to become mayor. People get offended. I ask, younger neighbors or whatever, are you going to college, as opposed to where are you going to college? And they act offended as if the child is dumb or something. And to Garrett's point about the College Board, at my high school, they would force people, if you were above a certain reading level, you'd be put in the AP level class, and they would force people to take the AP test, whether they were going to college or not, or whether their college accepted the credits. And it's a test that, unless your family makes below $40,000 a year, is $90. So they would force people to pay for a college credit replacement exam, regardless of if they wanted to go to college or not. and they have this, there's a cultural attitude that if you don't assume someone's going to college, you're assuming that they're somehow lesser than.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a big
And
cultural issue.
yeah.
And a lot of it is, you know, people of Dwight and Brian's generation, not them specifically, but you know, there's a
Gen Xers.
they want their kids to go to college, or they're viewed as a failure, right? There's a my kid needs to go to college, right? And that attitude needs to stop. And part of it starts at home, part of it starts in the public school system, and it's such a widespread, you know, pervasive cultural problem that I don't know where to really start with solving it.
Let me tell you something, Ryan. Here's a little story. A good friend of mine, Michael Bonsby, donor to the Montgomery County Republican Club. He sponsored events for the parties. Okay, he did not go to college. He has a very, very successful HVAC business. Now he branched into plumbing, and you know, he was telling me, he goes, I got these kids who go to college and they want to be, you know, they get some ME degree, they want to be plumbers. He goes, I'd rather they don't go to college. Let me train them how to do the plumbing and electrical stuff and HVAC stuff. And he says it is hard to find good qualified people that are able to learn that stuff. And he says one of the worst things that has happened, like when I was in high school, you could take an auto shop class, you could take a woodworking class, you could take there used to be a school, I don't know if it's still around. I don't know if it was around when Don was around. It's called the Edison Center, where they taught vocational things. They used to even, at my high school, they even had a cosmetology thing.
That was the same at my high school. I went to Eastern Technical High School, which used to be Eastern Vocational Technical High School. And we used to have an automotive department. Now it's closed. We still have construction. Okay, we still have our construction business, major, but I bet they're going to be closed. We used to have cosmetology. We used to have all of these, vocation jobs. And the thing is like all of our trade schools are completely barren in the United States. Like no one's going to trade school when we need them. We need plumbers. We need electricians. Who's going to fix our
Maseratis, you know?
Exactly. And they're good paying jobs.
For Yukons.
Right. And that's exactly the thing. So I was on a call the other night with some people from what's called the Eastern Panhandle Center Right Coalition. So these are people in West Virginia, and they also dip into a little bit to Washington County and Maryland. But one of the guys on there that's part of this group, he is a master tradesman. And he was saying to me as we were talking about education the other night, that this is something that is not going on at all, that he's seeing, that, kids are not being, taught or even given an opportunity to pursue the trades. And there was a guy who's actually a West Virginia state legislator. He's going to be heading the education committee, I guess, in this next session. And he's an auto mechanic. That's his regular job. And he says, look, you can make a 6-figure salary in a lot of these trades. Yeah. Kids don't know that. They think they've got to pursue these other fancy degrees. But there are people who are good with their hands and do a lot of things like this. They can make a really good living if they do that, but we're not offering that opportunity, really.
On a side note, I just wanted to say, probably my biggest gripe with public education today is the removal of home ec. Okay, home ec was.
We had home ec.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had home ec. Okay, just to teach simple things about living after you move out of your parents. Like so many kids don't know how to balance a checkbook. So many kids don't even know how to write an actual check. Okay, they don't know how to do their taxes. They don't know how to do anything. So they have to rely on so many people who could take advantage of them. Or they just don't do it, and then they go to federal prison because they didn't do their taxes.
Well, I think in talking about what we were just saying with the trade school aspect on all this college discussion, I mean, I think it, it goes back to the greater question before, like the example I think that Ryan was talking about when he asked someone whether if they're going to college and they take that as an insult, assuming maybe that there's a chance that they're not. And I think that really is a depiction right now of kind of where the social aspect of what college actually has become, is that you've seen it kind of become a continuation of socially how you and your friends and whatever interact in this timeline that's arbitrarily in front of kids, where you're going to finish high school, and regardless of whether or not that what you want to do in a career, you have an idea of maybe timeline wise, projection wise, what you want to do. You're going to go sign off $40,000 in loans at the age of 18 or 19 and get yourself in debt even from the complete total get go before you have an idea of where your career started. Really, just kind of on the whim from the of a continuation of the fact that socially and of a society right now. You're expected to do that, and your friends are going to do that. You want to do that. You don't want to be thinking less of. And you look at these trade schools, and maybe the participation isn't high in a lot of these different places for different reasons. And it feels like every time this topic comes up, we talk about how important trade is, how important going to trade schools are to keep those operational, and how high paying those positions are, and how they're under, under participation for them. And not a lot of people
underappreciated too.
But I think for the most part, kids still at the age of 17, 18, there very few of them are going to be like, oh no, I don't want to go, across the country to a 4-year school with all my friends to hang out and have a good time, completely free of having to pay back any debt. I'd rather go and learn how to work in HVAC. Like that's not practical. Unfortunately, it's just not how that's going. It's not how people are being pushed. It's not how public education is really trying to hone in on an individual aspect and figure out whether or not there are certain kids that should be going to college. They should be going, with maybe willing to take out this amount of money for this amount of, for this degree, because this is likely where you're going to end up in terms of max minimum in 4 or 5 year salary. Whatever the case is, they're not doing that. They're feeding a machine, it seems like, for the most part, of just keeping these universities afloat. And we brought up a really big point before about how the UNC system in North Carolina is a huge example. If you look at how much money those people make in the upper echelons of the administration for all these different universities, a chancellor position, what they make, how tuition and how fees have continued to go up. It doesn't make any sense at all to continue to try to push these kids into these schools to do, pretty much anything, and then expect them to be in any sort of financial stable position leaving it. And then when you want to wrap that into the home ec and financial literacy, I can't think of anything worse at that point. You don't even have the bare bones at that point, and that's on top of it. And then they'll tell you too, it's like, oh, well, how about graduate school? And I'm in law school right now. I was a first generation undergraduate student. So I went through that as kind of a learning experience, got out of there with the debt that's associated with an undergrad 4-year degree. And they're like, hey, by the way, you get the 3 more years, but tuition's going to go up. Everything's going to go up. Books going to go up. And, this is going to string out in terms of where you're likely going to be, financially for the next, 10 years, whatever the case may be. So I think it's more of a fundamental, issue from early high school, and then maybe even how we oversee a lot of our university system in terms of the expectation. Because, yeah, as somebody that has student debt, that would be great if I could wake up tomorrow morning and have that all gone. But we all have the understanding, too, that when you go into college and you sign your name on the dotted line for these debts, it's an investment in yourself. That's what it is. It's a short-term investment to get to a certain point, and you have to accomplish things in between. And that's going to be the hit that you're going to have to take. But if you play your cards right and have a plan in place, you're able to do things correctly at the end of it. Unfortunately, not many people, especially at a young age, think that far ahead with something like this. So because of that, a lot of people are in this position with student debt and are likely going to be in that same position, unfortunately, for the next, like I said.
I think one of the other things that kids should consider doing, take a gap year, find out what you want to do. Because a lot of kids, they go from high school to college. They have no idea what the hell they're going to do. I know a particular 47-year-old who doesn't know what the hell he's doing in his life, and he's got an MBA, it's like you need to, people need to go and kind of experience life a little bit.
Or to your point, to try to kind of like that gap year thing, I think one of the problems that we've had as a society, and high schools definitely do it, our public education system does it. Hell, I did it when I was in high school too, is there's a certain stigmatization around community colleges and 2-year colleges. And they fill a very key gap, because you can learn a trade in community college, or if you don't want to take on all of that debt immediately, you can get your basic English and math and science requirements out of the way, so that you can only have to pay for 2 years of 4-year college to kind of focus on your major and to get that piece of paper. There is a major stigmatization around community colleges and junior colleges in this country, when in reality, they are much more obviously affordable and provide the same level education, sometimes better than you do at a lot of 4-year schools. And I think a lot of that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where you kind of get, there's kind of that cottage industry of making sure everybody goes to a 4-year school, because it helps everybody, it helps the blenders, it helps the colleges and universities, it helps the public school systems to say we've got X number of kids in 4-year college. And I think I'm certainly not saying 3 2-year college like the Democrats are saying, that's insane. but it's an affordable option, and I think that public schools should do a much better job, and we as a society should do a much better job of destigmatizing it and saying it's okay to go to a community college.
I'll be honest though. I think I might be the firebrand in this group. I do think that free community college would be something reasonable, largely because of the amount of people who are being put out of work due to modernization, technological advance, and things like that. I do think one good thing that Andrew Yang, blessed be his name, the Yang Gang, who has brought to us, was that modernization has caused many people to lose their jobs, and it's very hard for them to learn a new trade or to get back into another industry or back into their industry, but at a higher level of understanding and technical skill that they previously had. And I think that community college are obviously going to be the easiest way to get those people back into an industry, back into having skills, back into having jobs again. I would be, I'd be absolutely open to like a compromise of like it only helping those people who have been, affected by those types of layoffs. But I do think that, free community college would definitely be something very good for America currently.
Garrett, Andrew Yang's going to be the next mayor of New York. I'm putting that prediction out there just on the.
Did he just move to New York?
No, I think he's been in New York City.
He's been a resident of New York, but he's announced that he's running.
Yeah, one of the things too, it's not just modernization though. It's also now the pandemic.
Yeah.
The pandemic has reshaped the economy. I don't know if any of us really have a good, clear idea of what we're looking at long term after this, because so many jobs have disappeared. Some of these jobs will probably not come back, and because of the businesses will not come back and things like that. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what we're going through here. All right, we're getting a little low on time here, but why don't we do this? Why don't we at least before we do final thoughts is just talk about 2020 briefly. What was it really all that bad?
Compared to 1929, no, it was not.
For me personally, no, but I think for the country, it was not a great exercise. It was funny. I was going back through my Facebook memories a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned. Particularly as it relates to the presidential election. And it was the first thing that was kind of the first salvo in the presidential election. And Trump was going off about the Warren's DNA tests and whatever. And I said, this just goes to show you how stupid of a year 2020 is going to be. And man, did I nail that one right on the head.
I think just God has a very funny sense of humor because, he gives us both a global pandemic, an election year, the most polarized the country's ever been since the Civil War. Just it all comes out to just a really funny and just crazy year.
It ain't that crazy.
Well, and look where the stock market was in March, and look where it finished. Who would have predicted that would have happened? And it's not because the economy is going super great guns right now either, right? It's there's still going to be issues and challenges ahead, but it's gotten a little frothy to say the least.
And, we've got a vaccine now. Things are going to slowly but surely, the second half of this year, granted that the Democrats don't screw everything up by then, but if they leave everything alone the way it is right now, don't touch tax cuts, don't touch anything, Joe could just go to the White House basement, retire there, bowl. Is there a bowling alley still there? You go bowling.
Yeah, the Eisenhower bowling alley.
Yeah, he can go down there, bowl all day, don't do anything, just shut up. Take a nap for the next 4 years and we'll all be just fine. When he starts monkeying around with
I'd be okay with that. I think the presidents do too much as it is, regardless of party. And the less a president does, the better we're all off.
And he's also going to be at Union Station every Friday to take the Amtrak back home to Wilmington because he's going to forget that he's not a senator anymore.
I don't think the Secret Service is going to let that dog hunt.
All right, Dwight, why don't we go to final thoughts and you control the board?
Sure. Final thoughts. Brian Griffiths.
We made it through 2020. I think that as we head towards later in January, the General Assembly here in Maryland is going to start meeting, and then all bets are off as to what those knuckleheads are doing. So at this point, there's a lot of things that are still developing, seeing what the General Assembly is doing. I think we're going to have a reckoning with sexual harassment by journalists. At least that's what it's seeming like here in Maryland.
Oh, jeez.
Onward and upward from here. I think that if you are depressed about the presidential election, do what we have done every time we have lost a statewide election here in Maryland, which is get up, dust yourself off, and move on to the next. We would have never had, if people were crying in their beer about Bob Ehrlich throughout 2011, Larry Hogan would have never won in 2014.
Amen.
So, the way to avoid losing in the future is to put yourself in a position to win. And as opposed to, don't go to any stupid marches, don't call all the senators from states that you don't live in. Get to work. If you put in the work, good things will happen.
And we've got to.
Marching is not work. Car parades are not work. Boat parades are not work. I think the election, the YR this year showed what you can do if you put sweat equity into things. Good things happen. So that's my shout out for the YRs today.
Ryan, if every bus going to DC on January 6th went down to Georgia instead, we'd have a much better chance of keeping the Senate.
But the people who are going on those buses don't think like you and I do, which is to say rational.
Exactly.
I mean, Brian, we've got Central Committee members that tell people we shouldn't vote because of what's happening in Georgia. People shouldn't go down there to vote because if they're not going to stop the steal. I'm like, you guys are idiots.
As I say frequently on Twitter, what a stupid time to be alive.
It ain't that bad. Ryan Nidak, final thoughts.
Okay. So I was skipped over for COVID. So I'm going to say this, right? We're 20 years into the 21st century, but I really think this is in terms of like how it will be defined in history books, this is the start of the 21st century, right? Everything is changing. And in a way, it's just accelerating existing trends. But this is what COVID was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back and putting a lot of things that were on the way out behind us. Movie theaters will be no more, just, as a microcosm of the larger picture, and accelerating in, the era of Zoom meetings and, big tech domination and how society shapes up in response to that will be very interesting. I also think it'll be interesting in that, after the 1918 flu pandemic, there was the roaring 20s, and I'm sure we will have our roaring 20s as well, as people are eager to get out again, and respond and, spit on the faces of Mark Elrich and Stuart Pittman and all the tyrants who tried to keep people home, even when they were making an attempt to comply with safety measures such as 50%, 25% capacity. They say you can't go out at all, you can't work, and people are going to be ready to get out and moving again, and it'll be an exciting time to be alive.
Garrett, final thoughts.
Well, I'll say this. I'll be going down to Georgia tomorrow. I have an early flight, so I'll be going down to help out with the.
Nobody's taking the midnight train to Georgia anymore. It's so sad.
So I'll be going out over there, and I'll be trying to.
Another reference half the panel doesn't get.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you got that reference, right?
I got you this time, though.
What's that?
I got you just this time, though.
There you go.
All right,
Well,
keep going, Garrett.
We're going to be trying to bring
doctors.
home, two Republican victories, but I'll say this. This is my prediction. Don't quote me on this. But definitely, I think Purdue's going to win. I think Loeffler's going to lose. That's my prediction. But but my prediction for 2021 and 2022 is that this is going to be probably one of the biggest party realignments, I think, in American history, 100%. After, how, contentious Donald Trump is, the Republican Party is definitely going to change on a lot of things. And it's going to be very interesting to see where our beloved party comes out on the other side of, the tunnel. So, yeah, that's me.
Christopher Stock, final thoughts from the great state of North Carolina.
Great state of North Carolina. So, I mean, trying to be positive, right? The bar's been low over for the last year or so. I think we've obviously seen and talked about it enough. So, you got to have the optimistic attitude going into this year. I do think, especially with the census results we should be seeing here soon, there's going to be a lot of changes here coming to North Carolina.
The better, I understand
Yeah,
too, right?
for the better. I think we've touched on what likely is going to be good news for Republicans going into the next year and the years to come. So North Carolina will see some changes. Hopefully, I think we're going to see a lot of different districts change, particularly at our local assembly here, and we're getting back up, started, ready to go here in the next 2 weeks. So keep your eyes on it, and positive mindset going into this year.
John Irvine, final thoughts.
All right, I'm going to take a little more somber tone and just say that, crossing the political divide, we had the news yesterday that Jamie Raskin's son, Tommy, passed away at the age of 25. I don't know that we know any more than we did last night because there was no cause of death initially announced for that. But even though, those of us on this panel that know of Jamie Raskin's politics would probably wholeheartedly disagree with him, this is a very sad thing to happen. To me, as a parent, this is one of those things that a parent should never have to live through, is to lose a child. And that's one of the hardest things I think you can go through in life. So my thoughts and my prayers go out to the Raskin family at this time for their loss.
Hear, hear.
And my final thoughts. I got a couple actually. One of my final thoughts goes to
It's always at least two.
My first final thought is I want to say, as a year, 2020, it was a bad year, but I'm a half full kind of guy, so it could have been a whole lot worse. It could have been a whole lot worse. It could have been 1929.
We could have had nuclear war at the beginning of the year, like we all thought there was going to be.
Exactly.
Was that this year?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was when we killed Soleimani.
But my point is, every time you're in the here and now, seems worse. But we'll look back this 5 years later, and we're going to say it's not that bad. Remember the Great Recession, or what the Democrats call the Great Recession? But it should have been called the Barney Franks give housing loans to any idiot that wants one can cause a housing crisis recession. But nobody says that. It's too long, I guess. But that wasn't even that bad. I mean, as many of you know, 2005 was probably the worst year of my life, and followed by 1996. But I don't know if it's a tie there. But anyways, but it gets better. See, the thing is, that's why I think Republicans are more optimistic than Democrats because, as Rush Limbaugh would say, it's really easy to be a downer. We're positive people. We know things are going to get better. What if we gave up after they stole the election from Ellen Sauer in 1994? What if we gave up after she lost in 98? I mean, hell, what if we gave up when the best we could do was a husband and wife for governor and lieutenant governor in 1990? Brian, do you remember that? Or you remember that?
I was 11, but I remember it.
Bill and Lois Shepard.
I believe they beat Ross Pierpont in the primary.
Yeah, and what's funny is we had a nickname for Bill and Lois in Montgomery County, Juan Perón and Evita. But my final thoughts is, basically at the end of the day, 2020 could have been a lot worse. 2021 will be better because, as they say, the good old days weren't as good as you think they were, and things aren't as bad as they seem. So, I mean, we'll be better off. And for my other final thoughts, I just want to thank all the Republicans who donated toys for U.S. Marine Corps Toys for Tots Drive. We have we helped them out. I think they didn't reach their goal for this year, at least in the Maryland area. And it was no small part thanks to organizations like the Montgomery County Republican Club, the TARS, the Young Republicans, collecting toys. The state party collected toys at the state party convention. And from what I gather is the Democrats were asked to help raise toys, and they decided to say no. And we raised more toys in Montgomery County than Camilla Harris did for her Toys for Tots Drive with her staff. They got 15 toys, and they were really happy about that. And you'd think Vice President selected Camilla Harris would have been able to get more people to give toys than just 11
That's what you're
toys.
talking about. I'm like, who are you talking about? Who's Camilla Harris?
But shame on you Democrats for not helping U.S. Marine Corps Toys for Tots Drive. You guys are the Grinch that stole Christmas 2020 because you did the lockdowns. You prevented people from going out and enjoying Christmas. Thank you. You guys are all a bunch
Mark
of
Elder said you're not allowed to enjoy Christmas this year.
What's that? Yeah.
He said you're not allowed to. We're just going to have to. He didn't say that you can't have people over. He said you're not going to be allowed to enjoy Christmas this year. It is what it is.
And the leader of the Grinch, all the Grinches, Governor Cuomo.
Hey, Mark Elrich helped us raise a lot of money for the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee, but he said we couldn't enjoy Christmas. So go ahead and continue saying more stupid stuff.
Yeah. And my very final thought, I will be running for county council at large in 2022.
Hey.
So that's news, breaking news, because I'm tired. I've never run a campaign on a council level. I've always done state assemblies, federal offices, or statewide races. And one is going to add a few more chapters to Dr. Politics' book. But here's the thing. My good friend Jim Rogers, when I was in college, says, these local municipal races, county councils, that's where those sons of bitches will steal your freedoms. And there's nothing you can do to counter that. And we look at this in the People's Republic of Monkey County, and I say that with love when I say Monkey County. It's a term of endearment, So, but here's the thing, change happens, and you can't, people who complain about taxes, people who complain about the roads, pay attention to the local news and vote Republican for once in your life in Montgomery County, for you idiots. Are you happy with the traffic jams? Are you happy with the bike lanes that are popping up everywhere? Clogging up traffic, and
so is that the slogan? It's Dwight Patel for county council. Vote for me, comma, you idiots.
Yeah.
I like that.
Trump.
I like that. I like that actually, because
I think we should end it there, Dwight.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. A vote for
regular
Dwight Patel
soapbox
is a
again.
vote to destroy bike lanes.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
I already hear Greg Klein opening his checkbook.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, bike lanes. Let me tell you, what really infuriates me about bikers, they're the most arrogant people on the road, and they do this on the bike paths, and they do it on the roads. When I'm running down a bike path, what do? They act like they own the freaking bike path and try to run over joggers. Hey, you riding on that electric bike, you're not even pedaling. That's not exercise, you moron. Or the ones that are driving down.
You're in trouble when Dwight says, "Let me tell you."
Yeah.
That's almost
as bad as not
you got these bikers that rock their
Can't
bike.
wait for the debates and Dwight saying, "Let me tell you."
Let me tell you.
These old Georgetown Road, they took out a lane for a bike lane on old Georgetown Road. Right now it's fine because there's nobody going to NIH, but once we go back to work, you're going to hate those bike lanes because now you'll have 2 lanes instead of 3.
All right.
And
Why it's time to
Motion to adjourn.
good night, everyone. Happy New Year's.
Good night. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody.
See you guys. Bye-bye.